so we're gonna just do a quick overview of a couple of things with the pedagogy and background of what MasteryConnect is. I'm gonna assume that we don't have any issues with anyone getting into their MasteryConnect account at this point. You guys have had it for a while, so I'm just gonna go ahead and skip past this the initial slide here. So, but if anybody does have a reason that they can't get into their account, just go ahead and let me know now. So I can let support know, but again, I don't think anyone's going to have any issues with that. Don't believe so. So I'm going to go past that. So real quickly about myself, I'm a former high school educator for 7 years in South Carolina, which is where I live. I taught high school social studies, AP European history, U.S. government, economics, you name it. If it was in the social studies department, I taught it. Then I became the district administrator for instructional learning and professional development for about 2 years before joining Instructure. Excuse me. I love to cook. It's one of my favorite pastimes when I'm not busy doing other things, as well as music and books, and of course, spending time with my family. I have a 14-year-old daughter who plays volleyball, so that is quite a busy schedule this time of year, especially in the fall. So just a little bit about myself before we move on. So today's session objectives are going to be, when we're done, you will be able to navigate MasteryConnect, create a tracker, find and create the assessments that we need for our students, assess student knowledge using a variety of methods, using data to identify levels of understanding, target our students for appropriate levels of intervention, and understand the various report types available in MasteryConnect itself. So that is what we're going to be covering in the hour and a half that we have together. So we're going to talk about the next step on our agenda here. We're at the getting started phase now. We're going to go to the what and why of MasteryConnect, a little brief overview, look at navigation, do a quick little demo of what it looks like from the teacher-student point of view, and then jump right into the mastery tracker aspect of it. So what they are, why they are the way they are, why they're organized, the layout of what goes on inside of Mastery Tracker, and then how we use those. And then we will talk briefly about the pins and the community feature in MasteryConnect, and then any remaining time we will focus on account development, where you are actually in the system creating assessments with me. That way I can be a facilitator for you. Most importantly, stay with me as we're going through this. We have a lot to cover, and I will go over things as many times as you need me to. Participate when we're actively doing things. Ask questions. My preferred way of having questions, of course, is typically going to be out loud, but given the system setup that we have, we'll probably be doing it via, user feedback, chat, that kind of thing. So however you want to ask questions, feel free to do so. I love questions. I want to make sure that that everyone leaves the session today fully informed and equipped. It is totally okay to make mistakes as we're learning this system. It is, you can't break it. I've been using it for over 7 years, and you cannot make a mistake that we can't fix. And most importantly, however, I want us to have fun. I think that once you begin to use MasteryConnect, you will truly understand the power it gives you to understand where your students are at the individual standards-based level, and that will allow us to be better practitioners for our students. So real quick, let's look at the 3 different types of teaching models that exist. We have traditional mastery learning, and of course, performance-based mastery learning. So in the traditional setup, we have our planning phase that we always do, and then we teach, practice, assess, grade, and record, and then we start all the way back over at the beginning where we plan again. So of course, the problem with this, as we all are well aware of, is that we don't necessarily know where our students are. So they make a 70%, they make a 65%, they make a 95%, whatever the percentage is on that assessment. We don't know what that missing link is without doing some very significant manual data analysis. And so we just keep on going. And so we just hope that eventually maybe they'll get the information at some point. So we came up with traditional mastery learning where we reteach, reassess, and re-record to kind of fill that gap in. But notice there's 2 things here. One, we still don't necessarily know where our students are. So yes, we're reteaching, but what are we reteaching? The whole thing? A part of it? Which parts? How do we reteach it? To what students? How do we determine that? And also the amount of time involved is going to be a lot more, because not only are we doing our traditional teaching, we're actually reteaching it all over again, reassessing it, and re-recording it. Performance-based mastery learning allows us to integrate the assessment through recording phases and the reteaching phases as we're doing our teaching and practice with our students. So as we're teaching, we're giving them formative assessments to understand where they are as we're teaching them content. And once we've taught the content, we're able to then give formative assessments where we can see how they are when they're doing their practice. So that at the end of the day, we're able to tweak our teaching, our practices, in real time, or as close to real time as we can make it, so that our students get the content delivered to them and taught to them in the most effective way possible. And of course, one of the biggest benefits, other than the fact that our students will become mastery learners, is that we save a substantial amount of time because we're able to adjust as needed. So I do want to bring out some of the new features that we do have in MasteryConnect that rolled out this past summer. These are the new student enhanced assessment features. These are applicable only to item bank item assessments, not for teacher uploaded or created. So students can now do the following things when they are taking an item bank assessment in MasteryConnect. This applies to all Starter Can Navigate item bank questions, which of course is what your district has. They can choose a high contrast theme, update the font size, zoom in, access full screen, and review the questions prior to submission. So again, this only works for item bank assessments. We do have the catch caveat about in classic mode versus enhanced assessment mode. All Starter Can Navigate item bank questions are in fact in the enhanced assessment. They have all been upgraded. But we do like to point that out. You may see this at some point, but it's not likely to see that in Starter Can Navigate. We also have the ability to enable text-to-speech. I would normally send this link in the help article into the chat, but you can look it up on the help section, which I will talk to you about what that looks like in a moment, where the help articles are if you're not familiar. But we can now enable text-to-speech for our students on item bank assessments, where we'll read them out loud for them. And I will actually show this to you when we get into the system. I'll bypass the slide deck for that. So let's take a look around real quickly at a mastery tracker before we actually jump into our training for today. So what we have here is this. If you are not familiar with what a mastery tracker looks like, this is what it looks like. So we have a list of students here on the left. We have our standards across the top, and we have data. So this is MasteryConnect is a very visual software. If you're not familiar with it already, it's very visual. It gives you a lot of cues that you can use without having to pull reports, run reports, or anything like that at all. You can get an idea of what's going on with your students and in your class. So in this particular instance, we have one assessment that we've delivered to all of our students on the standards that we see in front of us. I can see that it's one assessment because there's number one above each of these standards right here. Okay. So that is letting me know that I've given one assessment, and now I can look at the information that my students have scored on this particular assessment. So I can see, for example, that I have one standard that is doing very well. So right here, I'm not going to necessarily be spending a whole lot of time on that particular standard because they've already done advanced proficient, right? However, I have some other standards just looking at this that I'm probably going to focus more of my attention on. Also, we have individual student information across the rows. So I can see that some of my students are probably going to require more of my attention. I may need to teach them a little bit differently than I normally would, or maybe, there's all kinds of options that I have here. So now that I'm armed with this information, this pre-assessment that I've given, I go ahead and do these things. I plan my teaching and practice effectively. And now I've assessed them 4 and 5 more times on some of these standards across the board. And you can see the growth. So overall, the students are doing well in almost every single standard, with the exception of this one, NSC.5. They're not doing very well at all. So that lets me know as an educator that I have some things I need to focus on. So with this particular standard, it may mean that I need to look back at what I'm doing is in the classroom. I may need to get some outside assistance from other teachers or coaches to help me understand why my students are not doing very well on this particular standard. We also have an individual student here, Freeman Conyers, who's not doing very well at all across the board. He's not doing well. So that means I need to focus my attention on him specifically. Perhaps if he has an EL teacher or a SPED teacher or a coach or anybody else who works with this particular student, I can reach out to them for assistance. And if there isn't anyone, then perhaps maybe there are some tools and resources that we can allocate to help Freeman do a better job at getting the mastery, because something is obviously occurring with this particular student. So again, this is just a simple before and after. So we've done a pre-assessment, and now we have that information based on the pre-assessment. We're able to teach and practice with our students and then assess them. So all we've done is just do some basic comparison and contrast here. We haven't even looked into the system itself yet, but as you can hopefully glance at so far, you can see the power of that MasteryConnect allows you to have with your students. And this is possible because of the ITS model. So the ITS model stands for Identify, Target, and Self-Evaluate. We identify levels of understanding by using formative assessments. Then we target students for the appropriate intervention when necessary. I also like to add in the caveat that it's not just about intervention. If we have students that are exceeding mastery, they're doing really well, then we're not just going to ignore them. We're going to push them, right? So not only are we looking for students who are potentially not doing very well, we also are identifying those who are doing really well so that we can push them beyond the basic content and enrich their opportunities. And the third component of the ITS model is, of course, self-evaluate teaching and learning. This is very, very important that we as educators constantly self-evaluate our own teaching practices, our own teaching strategies to make sure that what we're doing is working for our students. So, for example, in this particular slide deck you have right here, this would be a great opportunity for me to self-evaluate what I'm doing as an educator and why I'm not reaching my students in this particular standard. And in this particular case for Freeman, I'm identifying a particular student who's weak across the board, not just in one particular standard, but across the board. So that lets me know that I need to do some targeted interventions specific to him. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to pop out of the slide deck and go straight into MasteryConnect itself. And we're going to do a quick overview of what it looks like. And then we're going to do a demo and then look at the trackers and explain all how that works and then get into the assessments. Okay, so let me pop over here. Okay, so for those of you who have not yet logged into MasteryConnect before today, or maybe you have, this is what it looks like when you log in. So this is the home dashboard screen. Some of you may have information in your news feed now. If you have never used it before, this will be completely blank. So that is totally fine. If there's nothing there, don't worry, it will be. So the news feed is a record of everything that you do, kind of like your Facebook timeline. So when you log in, you will see that there's a green banner across the top and there are 6 tabs. So if you are a classroom teacher or a coach and you do not have admin rights into MasteryConnect at the district level, you will not see this admin tab. So do not worry that that's not something that you typically will see if you're a classroom teacher. But you will have the remainder of these tabs. They're always here and they do not change. They don't move. So these are the home buttons for each of these categories. So for maps, trackers, assessments, pins, and community. You know where you are at any given time because of the shading that we use for the buttons. So for example, I'm on the home page on dashboard, and you can tell that because it's a highlighted dark green, and this particular sub-tab is underlined green. So that lets you know where you are. So if I were to click on, for example, assessments, it would change that assessments to a dark green, and I would know where I am based on that. So that's one of the visual cues we like to use in MasteryConnect to help you navigate. There are plenty of others that I will point out. So as you scroll down, you will notice that there is, of course, I have a long record of my newsfeed because this is what I do for a living. We have quick links to our trackers right here, and we have quick links to assessments. These are the most recent trackers and assessments that you've created. They're just little quick links for it so that you can access it straight from your homepage. On the left-hand side where your profile picture will be, if you have not already included one, we have our info button, our info section. So right here, this describes what your role is, what grades you teach, school, district, and state. It is important that information is in fact filled out correctly. MasteryConnect does pull that information whenever you're doing searches for assessments and other aspects of it to kind of make it a little easier for you. And also, if you're using benchmarks at some point in the future, I think that's something you guys may be doing. It is very important that anytime that something reports are generated by the administration or benchmarks or anything else like that, that information is in fact correct, because that is how the information is sent out to you, is based on what your role info is set up as. So if you have the thing incorrectly coded saying you teach a different grade level, you may not receive something that you're supposed to. So it's always a good idea to make sure that's correct. And actually, we're going to do that right now. So if you're following along and you want to validate to make sure your information is correct, what I want us to do is I want us to go to the edit profile link right here underneath where your profile picture should be. So there's an edit profile button. It's a link right here. We click that button, and it's going to take you to a screen that when you activated your MasteryConnect.com account, you notice that is very common. Okay. So you will notice that this is very familiar to you when you activate it. You want to make sure that the roles, grades, and subject areas are in fact checked the way they should be. You can, of course, change these at any time you want, because I know sometimes we change grade levels, change content areas. It's totally normal. But you want to make sure these are in fact checked, and of course hit the orange Action Save Changes button. The Save Changes buttons are always orange. Anything that does any action at all in MasteryConnect is orange. So if you see a link that is orange or a button that is orange, it affects a change into the system. MasteryConnect does not automatically save anything except student answers when they're taking an assessment. Everything else has to be actively saved by yourself. So always keep that in mind. When you see an orange button, that is letting you know that you're going to add something, you're going to delete something, make a save change, share something out, push something out, deliver an assessment. So always be aware of where the orange buttons are and what they're doing. Also, you will notice that in the right-hand section here, there's a Need Help. Right. So what we do in MasteryConnect, for the vast majority of the areas that you can navigate in, there are going to be help articles. And those help articles are located right here. So we have a white circle with a white question mark, and that is the helpful resources section. Okay, and there are two helpful resources, the Help Center and the Online PD. This is always going to be here with you no matter where you go. But we also bring those articles out to you when you're navigating around. The most relevant help articles will populate for you. So for example, if I was in assessments or if I was in my trackers and I was creating something or editing something, you're going to have some little help articles here that are related to that particular area of MasteryConnect. So when you click on the Helpful Resources button, you have two options, the Help Center and Online PD. When you click the Help Center, it opens it up in a new tab, and this is where all of the help articles related to anything you want to know how to do in MasteryConnect are located. They're broken into 6 categories. You can do a general search if you wanted to. For example, if I want to know what teams were, I could simply type teams, and it's going to pull up all the articles that are related to something called teams. And when you click on the link to it, you will see the step-by-step instructions required in order to do that particular item or action. The help articles are as simplistic as how do you change your password to creating the most advanced technology-enhanced item bank questions that we have inside of MasteryConnect. And they're step-by-step. It gives you all the information you need to tell you how to do what it is. And there are screenshots with, of course, highlights in any other directions that you may need. So anything that you need to know how to do in MasteryConnect, you can find out how to do it in the Help Center. The other option, of course, is the Online PD videos. I recommend that all teachers and staff watch all of the first 3 courses. That would be the Introduction, Intermediate, and Advanced. The Introduction, Intermediate will kind of go back over some of the things we're going to talk about today. Some of it we don't cover, especially curriculum maps. That's not something we're going to talk about today at all. But when you click on each one of these sections, these courses here, you will notice that they're broken down into smaller chunks. So the videos on average are about 2.5 minutes long. Some of them are much shorter than that. But they give you an idea of a quick video overview of how to do the various things it's talking about: navigation, community assessments, delivering assessments, that sort of thing. But they are done by one of us, the LSAs, and they're recorded, and they take about 1 hour and 15 minutes to do all 3 courses. But again, I highly recommend that you do this at some point. It does give you a course complete whenever you're done for each one of those, so it's a good way to know where you are and your overall understanding of MasteryConnect. It's a good reinforcer. So also, the rest of these, what you will notice is that when you click on any one of these green tabs, there's always going to be some some sub-tabs, gray sub-tabs, like in this case, profile, password, school, email notifications, etc. That's always the way that the system is set up. So you have your green tabs across the top, and you have the sub-gray tabs beneath that. I'm not going to cover what these are right here. They're very self-explanatory. And if you needed further information on that, we can simply look it up in the Help Center. But I do want to make sure that we all go to cores, if you're following along, to make sure that your cores are set up correctly for Kentucky. So cores and MasteryConnect are the standards that are being used. So cores are what the standards are for math, science, language arts, social studies, and what other subjects are out there for you. Your school setting should be Kentucky. Mine are set to default Common Core, which is what we use when we do our training. So yours will look different than mine. But if you want to make sure that you are in fact using the correct ones, the easiest thing to do is to do the first option in the drop-down box. Use my school's setting. And in parentheses, it should indicate Kentucky State Standards. But that's always a good thing to make sure that, in fact, you are using the correct standards, because that is what everything is tracked by. And if you're using the incorrect standards, of course, then the information will not be valid. Once you make sure, of course, these are in fact correct, we want to go ahead and hit Save Changes. So that way we are ensuring that we are lined up correctly with what we need. So if you have any issues at any point in time where your cores are not correct, you can let your Miss Susan know, or you can to notify us that there is something wrong with your core settings. But this is set by the school and the district, so you should never have any issues with these not being correct. But just always make sure that when you start the school year or start the semester, just take a quick peek at this and make sure that it is in fact set up correctly. Okay. So now that we've done that, so we have a quick little overview of what this looks like. I'm going to go ahead and jump into trackers. And let's look at what we have on the tracker screen. Okay, so when you go into the trackers homepage, which is what this is, I know that I'm there because it's dark green, as well as trackers subtab is highlighted green, underlined green. So on this page, we have three things of information. We have our created area, we have our collaborating on area, and our archived area. So when you are in MasteryConnect, the first thing that you must do is you must create your trackers. Okay, trackers are created by you, the teacher of record. They're not created by the administration. These are created by you. Depending on your school schedule, it could be once a year, or it could be every semester, depending on how your schedule is set up in your building. So trackers are created with two distinct pieces of information. One, they are created using a set of standards and a specific roster of students, right? So in order for you to be able to track student data at the individual standard level, which is what our trackers allow us to do, and that's what MasteryConnect is designed to do, you need to make sure that you have your standards correctly set, as well as you are aligning a tracker to a specific group of students. So for example, if you taught sixth grade math, like what this example tracker is set up for, you will have, if you have sixth grade math and you teach that class 5 times in a day, then you will have 5 trackers, one for each set of students with the exact same standards if you taught sixth grade math and you didn't have any variation in your standards. If you're early childhood, you would have one for each set of standards that you taught, even if you teach those kids all day long. So if you have a self-contained group of kids, you will have different trackers for the different content areas that you teach them throughout the day. So that is how the trackers are set up. When you look at the overview screen here, the tracker is giving you some information. So here's, of course, the name that I gave it. Below that is the content grade level area that the tracker is being taught on, so sixth grade math. The number of students currently enrolled, the core or the standards that are being used in this tracker, and the section number here. So the section number is the roster number from your student information system. So that information is synchronized with MasteryConnect, typically around midnight to 1 a.m. every day. So this section number is exactly the same section number that you will see in your grade book. So when we go through the adding a tracker process in a moment, you will notice that I'm able to select that. So it allows you to make sure that if you say this is your third period class, that you are selecting the third period roster, for example. And the very last thing is the curriculum map. So the curriculum map, if you are using a curriculum map, if that's something that you've created, or if you don't know what those are, curriculum maps are just another tool that MasteryConnect allows you to use to have common assessments and resources. And it's a persistent document. So once you've created it once, it lives on forever until you decide to get rid of it. If you were to create a tracker with a curriculum map in it, it would indicate that to you right here, although that is not something we will be doing today. If you ever need to edit any of this information, simply you can go to the edit link where the tracker is located, and you can make some changes. So if you needed to rename it, redescribe it, you can do that. If you wanted to add collaborators, which I'll talk about those in a moment, you can do that from here. Change the folder color. as well as change the link to the classroom. So if you were to accidentally name this incorrectly, or if you put the wrong section of students linked to it, you can simply fix it by editing it. You don't have to start over, and you can hit update. The only thing that you cannot change from a tracker in the editing aspect of it is what group of standards you're using. Okay, so once you created a tracker with a group of standards, you cannot change that. You have to start over again if you needed to change that. So in our created, these are the ones that I have created myself. This next tab, the collaborating on area, those are ones where I am working with another teacher. So they have their tracker they've created, and they've added me as a collaborator, meaning I'm a co-owner. So that means I can go in there, I can see their information, I can see the students' information, I can see the assessments, I can deliver assessments, I can add assessments, I can remove assessments, I can view the reports. I have co-ownership of that tracker with them. It is a very, very common practice to do that with EL teachers and SPED teachers or coaches, because that way they can see the students that they were responsible for in the trackers without having to create their own trackers, because they won't be able to see a lot of the information that you gather as a gen ed teacher. So it is a very common practice for collaborators to be, like I said, EL, SPED, or coaches in your content areas.
Hey, Stephen.
Yes.
We had a question from Tara in the chat.
Sure.
Reading and math have an unpacked version and a non-unpacked version. Which should teachers use?
Right. Susan, I believe we're using the unpacked standards, right, for Kentucky? I don't know if she's on here or not, but I'm pretty sure because I've done a lot of trainings with you guys, and I'm pretty sure, let me double check. I believe it is the unpacked standards for Kentucky. Let me pull up Kentucky Jefferson. But to give you, while I'm looking up the answer to that, just to so you know what the differences are between packed and unpacked standards, typically in most districts and states, the unpacked standards have a lot of sub-standards and indicators associated with them. So they're more broken down. There's more standards because there's sub-standards and sub-indicators versus the packed do not. It's just the actual mainline standard. That would be the difference between those two. Let me pull up the standards document and see if I can get it to work for me. Okay, nope. It is the unpacked standards is the information that I have. So if you have the option between packed and unpacked, it looks like, unless Susan's changed that or has different information now, it is still the unpacked standards.
Awesome. Thank you.
Not a problem. Okay. Yeah, I'm glad you asked, because you are one of the few districts that I have that does have the option between the two. So thank you for pointing that out. So when you're on the main tracker page here, let's go back to the actual main tracker page. You will notice that there are two other sub-tabs here. There's students and progress reports. Students, when you click on that, gives you a list of all students that you currently have in your trackers. So for me, it's going to be passed because technically the school year's over for the training tracker that I use, but I just haven't changed it yet. But here's a list of all the students that I have. So if they have a student login for MasteryConnect, this is where you could print their username and password, send their activation email, or delete them. I don't ever recommend you do that, of course, but you do have that option. Under the progress reports area, there will be nothing there unless your administration or either at the district or school level generates a progress report. There will be nothing there. I have a ton of those because I do training on progress reports and reporting, so I have a lot of them. But there will be nothing here for you at all. So that's why if you click on that, don't worry. But if that is something that is done, you will receive an email from the system saying progress report now available. So that's what those are. They're very detailed progress reports that go much more into detail than the standard reports that we have available. So let's go ahead now. We've kind of just done an overview of what all this looks like. Let's go ahead and talk about how we add these trackers. So we have the information listed here. Let's go ahead and add one. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to hit the orange action item button over here in the top right hand corner called Add Tracker. So when I hit that button, the new tracker creation screen comes up. All right, so again, need help is right there. So if you get to this point in time, a later date, and you're not quite sure, the need help is right here, the create a tracker link. So what we're going to do is I'm going to go ahead and walk through creating the tracker. So the first thing you must do, of course, is select the subject area. Notice that the core automatically populates based on what you set in your profile. And it should be set for you, but it's what was set. So I'll go ahead and tell it 6th grade. I'll give it a name. I'll select the folder color that kind of stands out. And here is the step that is the most important. So there are 4 ways that we can add students to our trackers. Because you are using a synchronization with your gradebooks and rosters, we are always going to select the last one, import students from SIS. So it typically defaults to the very first option, add students individually. So you will select the 4th one, and you will notice that this import from SIS row comes up. And then there will be a list of all the rosters you have available in your gradebook. You may not be teaching them right now, but they're going to be listed there. So at this point, now that I've named this description as Watts 3rd period, I'm going to look to see, in my case, I only have one option available to me, but that this is in fact my 3rd period roster. And once I have verified that, I'm looking at the data and making sure that they are in fact the same thing, then I hit create tracker. And when we do that, now there's going to be some erroneous data in here because these students are in my other tracker. But once we do that, you will get your student list here on the left-hand side, and you will see your standards across the top. There will be nothing else here. So if you would, please, if you have not created trackers at all yet, please go ahead and make one, at least one, so we can make sure that you are good to go on that aspect of this, because it's very important that your trackers are created correctly. This is where all of the student assessments and student data live. So we need to make sure we do, in fact, have those set up correctly. So again, we go to the orange add action, add tracker option. And then we fill out the relevant information. The most important step being that we are, in fact, selecting the correct roster based on the name we give it. And again, if you name it incorrectly, or if you click the wrong roster, the simplest thing to do is just edit the tracker once you created it, and we can fix either one of those. So I'll give you a couple of minutes to make sure you have a tracker created, and for any issues or questions that may arise, so we can go ahead and get those addressed.
I haven't seen any more, Stephen.
Okay, awesome. All right, so I'm gonna go ahead and jump on into the rest of this. Again, if you have any questions, feel free to ask us, or make sure, I wanna make sure everybody is on the same page and doesn't have any issues whatsoever. Okay, so now let's jump into a tracker. So before we do that, though, I want to make sure that I want to reiterate this one point. When you think about what trackers are doing, they are tracking, right? So we're tracking our students individually by standard. So when you saw that slide deck earlier with those colors on it, that is exactly what we're doing here. We are tracking our students individually. All of our data lives inside of our trackers, and it is forever until the system is deleted. So you can have data going back years. So that's one good thing about this. We do have the ability to compare student data and information from year to year, not just currently the ones that you're teaching. So when I click on the name of that tracker, I am taken to the tracker overview screen. We call it the overview because I'm kind of at the cloud level of my tracker, right? I'm not looking at anything individually. I'm not looking at an individual standard, an individual student per se. I'm looking at the big picture screen right here. So inside of this tracker, we have, of course, our student list on the left-hand side with their student ID numbers. These are the ID numbers that are in the gradebook, so they're going to be identical. We have our standards across the top. And we have several other areas that I'm going to point out to you. So on the left-hand side here, we have what's called the tracker list. This is a breadcrumb list menu item that is persistent. It always stays here No matter where you are inside the tracker, whether you're looking at an individual student or you're looking inside an individual standard, this particular tracker list breadcrumb menu is always going to be there. And that is for navigation. It makes it a lot easier to navigate inside the system when you have the tracker list there, because watch what happens when I click on this. So it's telling me one thing. This is the name of my tracker that I'm inside of. When I click this, it refreshes the page in this case, right? So no matter where I am inside my tracker, if I click this link, this name, it's going to take me back to this page. So that is one of the navigation areas I like to point out. It makes it easy to get around. We have an orange action menu. So all of these, since this is an orange menu, all of these do something, like adding assessments, viewing the standards that are included into my tracker. In this case, the Common Core. I can add standards. So for example, if you are a teacher who may have additional standards that you need. So if you're teaching an accelerated class, for example, if you're teaching 7th grade pre-algebra, but your students maybe get to the first 4 standards in Algebra 1 in 8th grade. Then, or if you needed to add additional standards back to your tracker. So this is where you would do it. You go to add standard. So when you hit add standard, you can select from existing ones. So like in this case, the Kentucky standards. And you can simply just say, okay, well, I want to add 7th grade standards because I'm going to be teaching a couple of those. And then you hit add, and it will add them to your tracker. So it is possible to have multiple grade levels of standards in a tracker if that's something that you needed to do. But by default, it only allows you to do one group at a time, and you add those individually. You can also add customized standards by creating your own. By that same method, instead of select from existing, you would simply hit create new standard. If for some reason you do not see the standards that you need, you would need to let us know at MasteryConnect so that we can add them for you. The rest of these options here, I'm not going to really spend a whole lot of time talking about. You can read more about those in the Help Center. They do not apply in most cases unless you're using the student and parent portal. So I typically do not talk about what they are for time's sake. One area that I will bring up is the add collaborator. So I mentioned what that was earlier, where you're a co-owner with another teacher. So if you are a general education teacher and you wish to add a teacher as a collaborator to your tracker, so it may be that an EL, SPED, coach, another content area person like yourself, if you want to add someone to your tracker as a collaborator, you go to the orange action menu on your tracker. So I'm in the tracker overview screen, and we would simply go to add collaborators. You simply search their name and hit update. They will receive an email and a notification saying that you have been added as a collaborator to such and such as class, and it will show up in the collaborating on in trackers. So when they get that notification in an email, the collaborating on, they would click on this, and then they would have the tracker name. So it would be your name since they're collaborating with you. And then they can simply go to it just like they would their own trackers. So they would click on the tracker just like this, and they're going to see the exact same thing that you do. And they can add, remove, delete, alter, or anything. So just always keep that in mind that they are in fact co-owners of your tracker. And it's also important if you're collaborating with someone that you remember that you have the same rights and privileges that they do. Okay, so let's look at what else is going on in our tracker. So of course we have our student list right here. We have our list of standards, and then the box above each set of standards here, we have a box with a little piece of paper and a number. That is indicating the number of assessments currently in that standard. So for example, I have 8 assessments currently being not utilized per se, but they're in here. There are 8 assessments associated with this standard. There are 3 assessments associated with this standard, and so on and so forth. There's 1 assessment for this particular group of standards. So that's what that number is indicating right here above the standard. When we see an M, it stands for MultiStandard Assessment. So every assessment in MasteryConnect has a home. If it is a single standard assessment, it resides inside the standard itself. So for example, that's why there's an 8 right here. There are 8 single standard assessments, or actually there's 6 single standard assessments inside of this one. And they're all living inside of here. But multi-standard assessments have nowhere to live because they belong to more than one standard. So we put them out here on the main tracker overview screen. Because there's more than one standard worth of information on this assessment, it sits out here. So another thing about multi-standard assessments is not only do they reside out here on the tracker overview to find them, they always show up. So they're placed on the tracker to the right of the last standard used on that assessment. So for example, RPA 1 and RPA 2 are the two standards that are on this mid-unit multi-standard assessment. I know that because it is showing up to the right of RPA 2. That is the last standard that was used. This Unit 1 assessment has 3 standards on it. I know that because it is showing up to the right of RPA 3. Same thing if you're using benchmarks. If you ever see benchmarks at some point in the future, they are the same thing. Benchmarks show up to the right of the last set of standard used on that particular assessment. Oops. So that's the reason why the tracker is organized the way that it is. So again, we have our individual standards. We have a number indicating the number of assessments associated to that standard, and multi-standard assessments live out here on our tracker overview screen. So if I were to click the name of this multi-standard assessment, this mid-unit formative, it will break it down by individual standard. So here are the 2 standards that were on it, just like I said, RPA 1 and RPA 2. And here is the breakdown of the mastery levels in a visual sense. This is not a report. It's just a visual look at what the breakdown was. And you can see the green, the red, and the yellow color coding indicating the mastery. If I click see the tracker list is with me, it followed me. If I click the name of my tracker, it will take me back to the tracker overview screen. Okay, so let's go ahead and jump into what assessments look like and the data that we collect from them. So what I'm going to do is when you hover, and I want to point this out real quick before I go any further, you will notice that as you hover over anything here, that MasteryConnect automatically opens up drop-down boxes and things for you. When you hover over a standard, you get several options here. Assess view standard, no, it's resource pin, set as a power standard. There's a calendar. You can add or create a substandard to this particular standard if you want to. And export mastery, that allows you to export your scores to your gradebook. And there's a very specific process that you use if that is something you wanted to do. But when I click assess, that is what takes me into the individual standard itself. So now I'm looking at all of the assessments that make up RPA 1's mastery level. So again, to get to that point, all I did was hover my mouse over the name of the standard and hit assess. You can also just click the name of the standard. Without clicking the assess button, I can simply just click this, the actual name of the standard, and it will take me to the exact same location. There are almost always 2, sometimes 3 ways to do the exact same thing in MasteryConnect. It's entirely based on what you, the user, want to do. So I know that I am inside the individual standard 2 different ways. One, the tracker list. Notice how it's not just Watts 3rd period 6th grade math anymore. It's saying that in an additional 6 RPA 1. It is letting me know that I am inside the individual standard. It is also listed right here above the student roster list. It is indicating which individual standard you're currently looking at. I can, if I hover over the little down arrow where the standard is listed in the tracker list, it allows you to quick link navigate to the other individual standards. So for example, if I wanted to see the next standard over, if I click that, it will take me to that screen. All right. So we have a bit of information. Just like we did on the tracker overview screen, the layout is very similar. Instead of having the names of our standards, we have the names of our assessments. So when you're looking at this, you have this assess button right here, and you have a raw score, and you have a multi-standard. That is telling you the type of assessment. So if it says assess, and you're inside an individual standard, or if it's raw score, these are single standard assessments. So that assessment, this particular one, like quick check on ratios or my RPA quiz 2, these are aligned to one standard and one standard only. This multi-standard, remember there were 2 of those out there. I had a mid-unit formative and I had a unit 1 assessment. This is pulling in this particular standard's mastery content levels, mastery cut scores for that assessment. So remember, the actual assessment is living out here. The multi-standard assessment is actually living out here on the tracker overview screen, right? But remember how trackers operate. Trackers operate by pulling information and collecting information at the individual standard level. That's how we know where our students' masteries are. So we have our multi-standard assessment living out here, but the information is stored inside the individual standard, that in this case, 2 standards that make up that particular assessment. So this is the information for RPA 1 off of this mid-unit formative, and this is the information for RPA 1 from the unit 1 assessment, multi-standard assessment. So when you click on the individual standard level, you're going to see that breakdown for everything, for only that standard. And here are all 8 assessments that make up RPA 1. So now that we have this overview really done here, I want to actually show you what some of the assessments look like when students are taking them. So give me 1 second to delete this so I can show you. So when we want to deliver an assessment, we click the Assess button. So let's say, for example, Gretchen needs to take the assessment. She's the only student who did not take it, so I need her to take it. So I click the Assess button right here, and the student will go to student.masterconnect.com, and they will type in the test ID number, which is on the test ID screen. So when we click the Assess button, this box pops up, and this is the test ID number. You notice right here, it expires in 4 days. If this says expired, then you would just simply hit Generate New Test ID. That is how the information is passed back into the tracker, is that test ID number. So they would enter their test ID number and their student ID number. And this is what the student sees. So this is an example of a teacher uploaded assessment, one they already had. It's a simple Word document, or in this case, it's a PDF now. So Gretchen sees this from her point of view. She has 5 questions. Here are the answers over here. Notice it has the test ID number in the top right-hand corner. As soon as I start answering the questions, it starts to save. So notice how it just saved. So it saves the student's answers in case there's any internet disruption or something like that. And once she's done, she hits finished. It'll give her the option to say yes or no. And you're finished. And you heard that beep noise. That is you being told by the system that the score has been entered. She did not get any of them correct. So she got a 0 out of 5. So now that that Gretchen has taken this, I want to actually look at the assessment itself. So again, just like on the standard screen, on the overview screen, when you hover over the name of a standard, you have some options. When you hover over the name of the assessment, you have a drop-down list of various things that you can do. The most quick and efficient way to access any of this information is simply to click the name of the assessment itself. So you can go to the individual links, but the easiest way to do it is simply to click the name of the assessment, and it will pop up the magic box. So this particular box gives you all of the information breakdown that you possibly could need regarding that individual assessment. So not only does it tell you who created it, it also tells you the assessment's info. So what type of alignment is it? Is it single standard or multi-standard? Well, remember when I told you when you're inside an individual standard like we are, and there's an assess button above it, it's single standard. And that is proven, again, right here, alignment type, single standard. And it also gives you the question types and when it was created. It gives you the scoring breakdown. So the total score possible was 5 points. To get mastery, they had to get 4 out of 5. And to get near mastery, they had to get 3 out of 5. Anything below that would be considered remediation. it gives you the answer key as well on this initial info page. The next option over actually pulls up the assessment itself. So if this was an item bank based assessment or a teacher uploaded assessment, either case, it is going to show you what the assessment looks like. Since this is one that we uploaded ourselves, the answer key is available to be changed. So if you miskeyed it for some reason, or you need to change the answer for that particular assessment, you in the tracker, so keep in mind, if you make a change here, it is going to rescore and recalculate their answers and their mastery levels for that group of students, not in all your trackers, just that particular assessment inside this standard for this group of students. If you were to go into your assessments and change the answer key, it is not going to change the answers that were used in this particular case. You would have to change them here too. And we'll talk more about that when we talk about assessments in a minute. So if you needed to make sure you hit save, but don't do that unless you intend to make a change. The next one over is reports. So our students have now taken it. All 10 students have taken the particular assessment, in this case, the RPA Quiz 2. So now I have my reports. Reports are generated the instant that a student takes the assessment. So I don't have to wait for all 10 students to take it. But now that they have, it makes a little bit more sense for me to kind of wait and see what's up. So in this case, we have 4 reports by default available to us on our assessment. The first one being item analysis. So we're familiar with what these are. This is a question breakdown. So it tells you what they answered and the breakdown for each question. And underneath that question, it also indicates the standard used on that particular question. So every question is aligned to a standard, and every standard is aligned to a question in MasteryConnect assessments. So you can see here on the chart here, there's a breakdown. I have 10 total students in my class. So there is 6 students that answered correctly, D, and 4 that did not. If I click on the bar chart itself, it will actually break down who the students were. So you can think about the power that it gives you, because now you know individually, without having to do anything other than they've taken the assessment. Here's the initial report, the very first report that we can see, the item analysis. Now I know which of my students answered which answer choices, not just that they got it incorrect. I can also look at different view options. So right now, the default is always the tracker you're currently looking at. I'm working in my 3rd period, 6th grade math tracker. You can look at all of your trackers cumulatively. So if you have more than one with the same standard and same assessment, you can look at all of them cumulatively. You can also look at all teachers in your school. So when you see a view option, teachers in my school, that only works if the teachers are, of course, one, using the same standards that you are, and they're using the exact same assessment that you are. If they are, then you will be able to see what their students' breakdown is in addition to yours. So, for example, there are other contractors like myself who use this particular set of standards and this assessment. So when I hit teachers in my school, I can see all of their information tied in with my students. And if you have a team, which is a feature in the community section that we will briefly go over towards the end, you can also do it that way. Teams are exactly what you probably think they are. They are basically you and another couple of teachers got together, created a team in MasteryConnect, and you can share resources, share assessments. And in this case, it allows you to see reports as well on the assessments. So the next report available to us is the Student Mastery Report. This allows you to see a comparison between the mastery levels of all students that you currently have in your tracker versus those with scores. So in this case, it's going to be identical, right? Because all 10 of my students have taken this assessment. So these two charts will be the same. Again, you have the same view options. You can also select the demographic break. Tracker comparison is exactly what it sounds like. This is where you are able to compare your other trackers side by side. And you can choose school year. So for example, if you only want to look at your currently active trackers, the ones you're using this school year, you can look at the ones that have been archived from previous years, or you can do both. You can do active and archived. and it will list all of your active and archive trackers that have these standards and this assessment in it, and it will give you a comparison. And of course, you can also do different school years. The last report available, again, only works when you are using the same exact assessment as another teacher in the same set of standards. So this is a teacher is in my school comparison report where you are able to pull look what your students' mastery levels are compared to other teachers' students' mastery levels. And again, you can also filter it by school year, active and archived, and also you have the team option as well. So teachers in my school in team option. So again, this report will not generate. There actually won't be anything on it if there isn't anyone to compare to. The most commonly used report is going to be the item analysis report. I think we can all understand why. It is very powerful. And just again, notice that this is a single standard assessment. So every question does have a standard associated to it, but they're all the same. If this was a multi-standard assessment, which I will show you that in a moment, you would notice that the standards would be different for each question. The next area in the magic box is the bubble sheet. So bubble sheets are scantrons that you can print off and allow your students to take the assessment that way instead of digitally. If they are taking it digitally, you can also have them do it this way. I always recommend that you leave these three options checked. That is the pre-filled student IDs, the assessment's name, and as well as your name. This will allow you to not have to worry about the students remembering their ID number, because that can sometimes be a bit tedious for them. I know in my school system, for example, our ID numbers were 12 numbers long. So it was not ideal for them to have to remember that. So I will show you what one looks like if you wanted to use it. These are what the bubble sheets look like. So for example, here it is. We have the name, the student name, and their ID number already filled in. They would simply just fill in the answers. And then there's something called the grade cam, which is right here. I would come to the name of the assessment and hit scan scores. I click that box. And the grade camera will be turned to ready. And a green dot will show up. It won't work because I have a Google Classroom on. A green dot will highlight up here next to the name of the assessment. And that's how you scan the Scantron into MasteryConnect. You just hold it in front of your webcam. It makes a beep noise, and you go on to the next one. Once you kind of figure out how to angle the paper, which you'll be doing it here in the grade cam box where it says it's a black grade cam box right here. Normally it would be showing my webcam, but since I'm on a webcam, it won't let me do that. But you can typically do about 25 to 30 Scantron sheets in about 1 to 2 minutes. It doesn't take very long at all. So, but always keep in mind that you are scanning the correct assessment, because it's not going to know which assessment you're scanning. The only way it knows that is because I told it to scan scores. So if I have, for example, if I have this set of Scantron bubble sheets, and I don't mean to, I could scan the wrong assessment. So you just want to make sure that you're putting the right information in the right column when you're going to scan. I'll turn that off. There we go. The next option in the info box is to print scores. This is a score sheet. So simply all it does is it gives them their mastery level for that assignment, what they answered. And if you wish, you can actually show the correct answer for missed questions. And if it was an open response question, you can hit that box right there and it will allow them to do that. Notes and dates. Date is date given. So the day the very first score was entered into the system, that is what will be shown there. And the last option is how you can change the privacy options for your students' ability to view the assessment, answer key, item analysis, and their student answers if your district and school is using the student portal. If you're not doing the student portal, they won't have access to this anyway. So again, you get all that information. You get the reports, you get the answer key, you get the bubble sheets, the print score options, all of that by simply clicking on the name of the assessment in the standard. And that allows you access to all of that information. All this information is automatically generated. You don't have to do anything. It's just there for you as soon as the first score is entered. Now I'm going to show you, if you wanted to go into a multi-standard, assessment and I'm inside of a single standard, you can simply click the name of this and it will take me to that multi-standard assessment. So here it is. And if I want to pull the reports, just like I did, I would simply go to the orange action menu. So this is a multi-standard assessment. The orange action menu, reports. And it's going to pull up that same box that we're familiar with. It's just a little different way of getting to it. But you'll notice on this item analysis breakdown, the standards are different because this is in fact a multi-standard assessment. And the only other difference here is that the reports look different if you are doing a teacher comparison, because now it's breaking it down by individual standard instead of it being cumulative. And again, I click the name of my tracker in the tracker list, and it will take me back to the tracker overview screen. So are there any questions regarding any of that? I'm trying to make sure I cover everything, but I also don't want to take too long because I know we need to get to the assessments aspect of this.
No, there were no questions.
Awesome. Okay. So the last report that I will show you before we jump into the assessments piece is the individual student progress report. So over here on the left-hand side, you will notice that as I move my mouse over, it becomes a hyperlink and there's an edit option. So the first thing I'm going to show you is how you turn on text-to-speech for a student. So when I hit edit, the edit student box comes up, and this will allow me to check the accommodations area right here, allow text-to-speech for compatible assessments. Remember, this only works for item bank assessments. It does not work for anything else that you may upload yourself. This option must be turned on in every tracker that student is residing in. And it must be turned on by the teacher. It's not a site-wide option. So if a student requires that accommodation, you, the teacher, would have to go in there, put your mouse over their name, hit the edit button, and simply check the box, hit save. And now every assessment that's item-based, they will have the option to turn on or turn off the ability to text-to-speech themselves. But again, this has to happen. So if a student has that accommodation, every teacher would have to do this for every tracker that student appears in. So, but when I hover over the name and I click that person's name, so if I click Credgen Bennett's name, it's going to pull up her individual student report. So what you see here, of course, these are all the standards. Here's the current mastery level for each standard according to the assessments. And over here on the right-hand side, we have a quick bar graph, circle graph rather, that is indicating 71% in mastery. So of the total number of standards assessed, of which I've done 24% of them right here, she is 71% in mastery. It's pretty good, not bad. But I can also do more than just look at this. If I hit expand all right here, not only does it break the standard out all the way, so I have the full standard, but here are all of the assessments that make up that score, that mastery score. I can click on the name of the assessment and it will pull up the assessment itself. This was a rubric that we used. It'll break down the item analysis for the class and also what the students' answers were. So you can view that information in the student report. This can be printed off if you want. These are very useful when you're doing RTIs. And we did this a lot in my district when we did RTI. We usually printed these off as part of the permanent record. Okay. So those are the 5 basic reports that you get as a classroom teacher when you're using that. You have 4 that are based on the assessment itself and 1 that is an individual student report. And again, progress reports are generated by the school and administration, so that is not something that you would see unless that has been done for you. So let's go ahead and shift gears away from trackers and how we navigate them and what they look like to talking about assessments. So there are 4 ways that we add assessments to MasteryConnect. The first one is item-based. I'm sure some of you may be familiar with that if you've been toying around in the system already. The second way that we do that is uploading one, like the example I showed you earlier, the demo that I showed you where the student took the assessment, that is a teacher uploaded. We just have a file that we like, we upload it to the system, and we deliver it to our students. We can also search the community. So when I click on the assessments homepage, it defaults us to all. What I'm looking at here, these are all of the assessments shared on the community. So when you create an assessment, when you upload one that you have the option to share it with everybody else in the United States on MasteryConnect. So that's what we're looking at here. That's what all of this is. And there are 599,000 of them. So that is the third way that we can add an assessment, because you can use one of theirs. And the fourth way that we add an assessment to the system is by cloning one that already exists. So cloning is copying. You can take any one of these assessments, clone them, make changes to it, and then add it to your trackers. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to walk through the very first method of adding an assessment, which is item banks. So I am on my assessments homepage. I hit add assessment. This assessment type will not be there for you. It just is for me because I am a district administrator for MasteryConnect, so it shows that up, but you will not have that option, so we're going to ignore that. So the first thing first, you have to select the subject area. So I'm going to say it's math. Notice the core populates for me. I need to select the class period. I'll say 6th grade. Now we need to decide standards. So since we are doing an item bank assessment, these are the Certica Navigate item bank questions that are already aligned to the Kentucky standards and to state testing. So it is very important when you're doing an item-based assessment that you know whether it's going to be single standard or multi-standard. If you select multi-standard, you have to make sure that there are, in fact, multiple standards on that assessment. Otherwise, it will not allow you to create it. Same thing if it's single standard. If I select a single standard for that, it will not allow me to add questions from any other standard except that one. So it's very important that when you're creating an item-based question, or assessment rather, that you do in fact know that going in. So I'm gonna say it's multi-standard for the training purposes. I'm gonna give it a name. Titles must be unique. Assessments in MasteryConnect cannot have the same exact title. So if you're going to reuse an assessment, for example, let's say you gave this assessment to your students that did not do very well and you want them to take it again, you would simply need to make a copy of it, clone it, which I will show you how to do in a moment, and just add the word reteach or retake at the end of it. You can use the exact same file in an assessment itself, but the name can't be the same. So we'll give a little description. And then the most important piece. So one thing I want you to notice is that as we go through all 4 ways of adding assessments, this process at the beginning never changes. So how we, with the subject area, the core of the class, and the standards, and the title and the description, this is the same exact process no matter how we're adding an assessment to the system. The thing that changes is where we get the assessment from. So we could get it document-based, in other words, uploading a file. There could be not a document at all. Maybe we're just using a bubble sheet. But in our case, we're creating an item-based assessment. And so you would select Certica Navigate. You won't see the rest of these, but you'll select Certica Navigate. And notice what happens. We get the item filter screen comes up. No, but the privacy right here has defaulted to private to my district. Okay, item-based questions cannot be shared to the community. They have to remain private to your district because your district pays for that. And of course, you have the option to make it just private to you if you want, which I have to for training. So in the item filters, we have our standard selection. So here are all the standards. I can select which ones I want. In parenthesis, it is indicating the number of items available to that standard. You can then filter it further by item type. So these are the example question types. So for example, short text, match list, choice matrix. Some questions, some standards have different enhanced items, some do not. It just depends on the standard itself. But there are roughly around 45 to 48 types of questions that can be used. You can also filter it further by doc level. Over here on the right-hand side, you have the option to look only for ones that you can print off. So if you needed to hard copy print off an item-based assessment, you can check this box right here, and it will only show you the ones that can, in fact, be printed. just keep in mind, advanced technology enhanced item questions cannot be printed because they're technology enhanced. We also have the option to filter between English and Spanish. So if you have assessments that need to be done in Spanish, you can select that and I'll filter out the ones that are only in Spanish. Same thing for English. So once we've made our filters, we've decided what we want, then you come down here, here are the results. If I click on the blue link right here, it will actually pull the item up for me. So the first thing that you see, of course, is this is the student's view. So as the teacher, you are allowed to manipulate and interact with the question itself. So that way you can know how they're going to be answering it. And then, of course, it shows you at the bottom what the correct answers are. So in this case, I, as the teacher, can determine, I can look at it and see how they would answer this question. If I like it, I can go ahead and straight away add that item. You can also skip to the next item. There's a little arrow right here. If I click that box, or that button, it will allow me to go to the next question and see this is a closed choice matrix type question where the student interacts with it by dragging the answer into the box. And you have the option, again, like I said, you get to manipulate with it. That way you can understand how they're going to answer it. And again, if you hit add item, like if I add this item right now, it will automatically pull up the next question. You can add that one, and so on and so forth. So here's an example of a match list. And I can add that one as well. Okay. You can also add them straight away by hitting the green check, the green plus sign right here. So if I want to add that one, or maybe this one. You can also add a random quantity. This is very useful if you're doing like a pre-assessment and you don't necessarily care which types of questions are on there. You just want to do a pre-assessment of a standard. You can simply just type in 5 and then hit the plus button. It'll take a second and then it'll add 5 random questions out of that standard. You can also randomize the items in the assessment to make sure that there are no, if for some reason you want them to be randomized, you want them to not be in a particular order. So the last thing that we have to do, in order to create the assessment, we filled out the subject, the core, the class, the standard. We said it was multi-standard. We've given it a unique title and a description. We've selected our source, which in this case is going to be item-based because that's what we're creating, an item-based assessment. We selected Certica. Now we have the last most important piece, the actual mastery cut scores. We have to tell the system what the score is going to be. Notice here that I chose 2 standards on my multi-standard assessment, and they are broken down right here. The scoring is broken down. So there are 10 points possible for the first standard, and there are 5 points possible for the second, for a total of 15 points on this multi-standard assessment. I need to let the system know what is mastery and what is near mastery. So I'm just going to pick something that I typically would have used. 80% ballpark is typically what I usually recommend. And then create assessment. So once we have all this filled out, we hit create assessment. And when we are done creating an assessment, whether it's one that we've uploaded or it's item-based, you are taken to that assessments page. So here's what it looks like when we're done. Here's what the assessment looks like. These are all the items. I can make an edit if I needed to. I can delete it if I want to. I can even bookmark it to what shows up in a quick link for me to find later. But it gives you the breakdown of the scoring as well as who created it. In this case, it's me. And it also aligns the questions to the standards for you. It gives you that right there, so you know. If you like it and you're ready to add it to your tracker, you can do that from this screen. You can hit add to tracker. And then you can simply select whichever trackers that it associates with. Now, keep in mind, assessments must have the same standards as the tracker you're going to add it to. If they do not, then you will get an error that says standards misalignment, and it will not allow you to do so. It basically saying you don't have any trackers that have those standards on it. So always keep in mind that you have, in fact, created your trackers. If this is the summertime, you won't be able to add an assessment, to your trackers until you have created them. And that whatever you're doing, that your standards, that you have a tracker with those standards in it. So once you've created an assessment, it shows up in your created area. So for example, here it is, demo KY Jefferson. So let's talk about these two areas right here real quickly before I move on to the rest of the ways that we add assessments. You notice how I have a using right here, it's 33, and I have 42 created. So using, it is possible to use an assessment in your tracker. So if I click on that using column right here, it is going to give me a list of every single assessment that is currently being used in my trackers, in my created, not my archived. So it is possible to use an assessment that you did not create. So that's why we have a difference between using and created. You may have gotten it from the community or somebody shared it with you and you're using it, but you did not do anything to create it. And of course, you can sort how this works. The created being most recent, most viewed, highest rated. Typically by default, people leave it at most recent, the sort by option here. Bookmarked is exactly what it sounds like. You've bookmarked it like you did a website and you just want to come back to it later. Your item bank area right here will be blank. Item bank is for ones that you yourself have created. It is possible to create item bank questions like the one Certica has. It is a possibility to do that. Your administration would have to release that right and privilege to you, and that's something that some districts do. But if you are given that access right to create your own item bank questions, that's where they would show up. And for you, if you click on that, it would be blank. For me, of course, there are item banks questions that I have created. So don't worry about that if you were to click that at some point and say, hey, it's Mr. Watts, it's blank. I don't have the item bank. No, you have the item bank. These are just custom item bank questions that you can create. All right. So that was adding an item bank assessment. Let's talk about adding one that you already have. So we're going to talk about teacher uploaded assessments. So it's the same process that we used before. We fill out all the information. Except in this case, we're going to do it document based, right? So we're going to say upload a file. It's just like adding a file to an attachment to an email. You would find out where it is. You can decide the privacy level. And then you would, of course, then indicate the number of questions. So in a teacher uploaded or teacher created situation like this, there are 5 types of questions that can be asked: rubric, bubble sheet, true, false, multi-select, and multiple choice. Notice with the item bank, there are about 47 different types of questions. So there you have more limited options when you do teacher uploaded, just because of the technology involved in making an enhanced item like that available to Word documents and PDFs does not exist yet. I'm sure it will one day. So once you have the number of questions correctly listed out here, then we would go ahead and just fill in the answers. You can change the point value from 1 point to as many as you want. You can change the question type. So if it was multi-select or true, false, rubric. So rubric would be something that you would have to grade yourself in the system. And I will show you how to do that momentarily. So here's the next most important thing. So now that we know what the answers are, we have to align it to the correct standards. So here is where we do that. It is very important that you have the question and the standards as close as possible. So you want to make sure that because this is how the data is stored. Okay, so if this is not done correctly, this is not filled out correctly, then the data feeding back into your tracker is not going to be accurate. So you always want to make sure that when you're doing a teacher upload, or if you're cloning another teacher's assessment from the community and you're changing it to your standards, that you do in fact have the standards aligned as closely and correctly as possible. Once you have that information done, it's the same as it was for the item-based. We have to put our mastery cut scores in there. And then I can hit create assessment. But I've made an error and I want to show you what that looks like. So if you make an error when you're in the process of creating an assessment, you're going to get the red banner across the top and it will not go away until you fix it. You also notice here that the create assessment button is grayed out. It will then highlight to you the area or areas that need to be corrected. And once you've done that, it will then allow you to create the assessment. And again, once you've created it, I'm not going to create another one. Once you've created it, you can find it here in your created, and you can simply add it to your tracker by coming to the thumbnail underneath that add to tracker. Or if you were actually inside of the assessment, if you click on the name of the assessment, it will take you to that assessment's detail page where you can download it, print it off, make a copy, but you can also add it to your tracker that way. You can also add assessments to your trackers another way. You don't have to do it from the assessments page itself. You can actually be in your tracker. So if you're inside your tracker working with it, and you say, oh, I need to add an assessment. Well, we have a handy button right here. And I ignored that earlier because I wanted to talk about assessments first. If you hit add assessment here, it's going to do a little bit of assist for you. So for example, if I wanted to search the community for an assessment that would fit my 6th grade Common Core tracker, if I hit search the community, the system's going to automatically pull my standards and my grade level into the search filter for me and find every assessment out there that is Common Core Math 6th grade. So there are about 12,980 assessments shared on the community that deal with 6th grade math that are Common Core. And if I like one, then I can simply say add to tracker and hit add. So again, I did that by being in my tracker itself. I was actually in my tracker to do that. So if I go back to my tracker and I hit add assessment, it allows you to search the community. It also will filter through your currently created assessments. So if I hit select from my assessments, it's going to do that same filter, but it's going to be created by myself. So these are going to be all of my created assessments that deal with 6th grade Common Core Math. And same process, you can simply then say add if you know which one it is. And lastly, the one advantage of doing an add assessment from your tracker, not only does it make it quicker because it's already filtering out those specifics that you need. If you add an assessment and say create new assessment, it fills in all the information that we filled in first. So it fills in the tracker, subject, core, class. One thing you need to do now is select the standard and the source. So it does expedite a little bit of the work. You don't have to fill all that out. And again, that works only when you're in your tracker and you add an assessment from the tracker itself. So some people prefer to do it that way. Some people do not prefer to do it that way. It's simply up to you how you wish to add assessments to your tracker. You can either do it from your assessments homepage and add them, add to tracker like this, or you can do it by going into your tracker and telling it to do it that way. So again, like I said, there's always 2 ways to do everything inside of MasteryConnect. It's entirely user preference on how you want to do that. So are there any questions about adding assessments, creating assessments? teacher
Nope.
upload, and form-based.
Nope, we didn't see any.
Awesome. Alrighty. Are there any general questions at all regarding anything that I've talked about today? I know that the item-based assessments, making sure we went back over that again was kind of an important question, or important area of concern for today's, based on last week's conversation I had with Susan. Is there anything else that y'all particularly want me to focus on?
Not that I know of. We didn't have any questions. So.
Awesome. Well, okay. Let's see. See if I've left anything out. I don't think I have. Let's make sure. Okay. Yep. Oh, and one thing I do want to point out as well, when you're on your tracker home page, there is this print extra bubble sheets option. If you want a classroom set of bubble sheets, I did this when I taught economics and government. I printed off a master copy for them. It's like 40 questions long, and I laminated it with Sharpies. Not Sharpies, but dry erase markers. And it had their student ID number on there and their name. So they just kept it with them. And that way they could walk into the classroom. There would be an assessment up on the board. They would take it real quickly. They'd walk over to my computer. They would scan it in, then sit back down while I'm doing the attendance, talking to, having individual conversations with students, that sort of thing. That's what this option allows you to do, is to print extra bubble sheets. When you click that button, it won't pop up for me. I do not know why. I need to get them to fix that. But it will pop up a list of your trackers, and it will say which ones do you want to print off. So it allows you to do like a bulk print of bubble sheets, and they're not assigned to an actual assessment. Because remember earlier when I showed you these were tied to that particular assessment. But that allows you to, the print bubble sheets option allows you to print off a generic bubble sheet set for your class, if that's what you wanted to do.
Awesome. Thank you.
Yep.
Yeah. Susan just came in the chat and said just let people know they could contact her if they have any questions. And she did mention, and this is true, we will be, this video, I'll be breaking it down. So this, however long this session is, it'll be its own video on our channel. So.
Awesome. Well, I hope you guys have a good rest of your school year. I know you guys have already started. But of course, if you have any questions regarding MasteryConnect, feel free to reach out to myself or to Tammy, and we'll be glad to take care of any needs you have.
Awesome. Thank you, Stephen. We appreciate it.
Absolutely. Have a great day.
You too. Thanks.